Sorry for the huge delay here, but basically what happened is my hard drive that had most of my development stuff on it got corrupted and I had to send it to a data lab. And in that process, during that whole debacle, I thought that I lost the recordings for the walkthrough I made. Because I have like 5 different hard drives. And it turns out they were on a different hard drive, and while I was moving stuff around, I found them. And so there was really no reason for the delay. Unfortunately, there was a delay though, but now we're back so we can continue on from where we left off. So this is part 9 of my walkthrough for Krein. Now we're in Boneyard Bluff. We just finished off the Dragon Rest chapter, and now we're going into a new environment which is bone themed. It has this subtle sense of a wasteland, but it's not emphasized as much. It's not as artistically expressed as it could be. But instead, the buildings and the architecture that is formed purely of bones is the thing that stands out. So immediately when we exit the hallway, we are displayed with a bluff on top of which sits a shrine made of bone that has some motifs that reflect Gothic architecture in a subtle way. The atmosphere is gloomy as well, so you kind of get this unsettling mood from all of this. And this is, to some degree, well, there's a modicum of a reference here to Bluff Ever Smoking, but not entirely. Now, here we have the next boss, Bones, which has some interesting mechanics. And this is another fight that is anti-magic, actually, because it's immune to almost every kind of magic. You have to engage in physical attacks almost exclusively. So in the first phase, a skeletal dragon flies down and attacks you, and you just have to get it to half health before it flies away. Then the boss comes out of the bone pile, and he's got a lightning attack primarily, which does some decent damage, and you have to damage him down. But it's a DPS race because around half health, a bunch of skeleton adds are going to come out of the ground. But instead of attacking you, they're going to head towards the boss. And once they get close enough to the boss, they will basically dissolve him and buff him at the same time. The boss then gets healed and buffed. I think the attack strength and stamina increases. So basically, you have to kill the adds before they get to the boss. Or you have to kill the boss before the adds even spawn. Otherwise, the boss is going to get healed over and over by the adds and become more and more powerful over time. So if you're a Magicka build, this is particularly annoying, and you have to rely heavily on stamina potions and damage him constantly. He also has an explosive AoE that does decent damage as well, but it's easy to LOS that. Now in this fight there are 2 skull poles, one glowing blue and the other green. You can only choose one, but it gives you a stamina replenishment if you choose the green one, and a Magicka replenishment if you choose the other. Now, even if you're a stamina build, I think having a couple of points in restoration is very useful, as it cuts healing spell costs in half, so you don't have to rely on potions as much. Then you can just use Magicka to get a free heal from the Magicka bone. Overall, I would say this is actually an easier boss, just way more annoying, especially as a Magicka build.
with us what you will, traitor.
So this is the treatment I get from Milo. You refuse to listen, even after I've triumphed.
What do you seek to do? Why have you killed Rikorov?
Fool! I wanted to fight you in the first place. If you hadn't attacked me on sight, I would have told you. Silvervan betrayed us. I didn't kill him. I was ordered to abandon him.
You accuse our leader of betrayal. That is blasphemy of the highest order. If not you, then who could have killed him? Nobody is strong enough to.
I saw it with my own eyes. The humans that live in the castle of Caldara. Well, the place is real. Nonetheless, if I were lying, I'd have no reason to spare you. I'm finished with this world, with our pact. You are all agents of deceit, mindlessly following his orders. But I ask that if Cinderholm has a motive of honor running through his veins, bring him next to me. Do as you wish. Pursue me to all hell.
Another thing is that around here, the rogue dragon Vazinstein will help you in the fight if you did the quest to meet him and you finished helping him in Silvermorn. Then there's a point up ahead where you can talk to him and it unlocks access to the end chapter. So this is another example of how Krein is unlike almost any other story DLC mod, because what the player did way earlier can affect what happens way later in the campaign. Now, the next level puts a stronger emphasis on unique construction of architectural structure using bones, which I thought was quite nice, but the environment overall remains a bit unrefined and ends up just being a passage map, which is a nice view for a few seconds, but lacks some substance, although it does have some connections to the upcoming subplot, so it's not irrelevant that the player is going through this area story-wise.
Maybe abusing magic caught their attention.
You need to stop blaming me for everything that goes wrong.
You should know what's going to happen more than anyone. Therefore, it's your fault.
Why are you whispering?
What?
Why are you whispering?
There's someone here. Damn you. You scared me. Where have you been?
The tides have guided once more. Alas, they have also kept Vizier with me.
Friends like you.
For the last time, we are not friends.
Now, here's the next boss fight, the Skeletal Serpent. This is a procedural fight like the Dwemer Golem in Urzun, except it has a time interval aspect to it. So here the boss has a single phase in which it'll go through a cycle of spitting acid at the player, which will spawn a permanent AoE that you have to avoid because it does crazy damage. It will then burrow itself into the sand and poke its tail out from underground for a number of times, which, if you don't run away in time, causes significant damage as well. So here you have to constantly be running around, and it's actually easier for stamina builds because you typically have enough stamina and stamina regen that you're not worried about slowing down. You can just keep sprinting. Then it'll pop out of the ground at one of two locations, which are either side of the center of the arena. There you have to activate one of the two furnace valves so that it expels fire out of the vent in order to damage it. It is not damaged by normal attacks, so you have to do this 3 times to defeat it. During that time, there are a few other mechanics. Throughout the fight, there are stalactites, basically stone spikes, that fall from the ceiling. And you want to make sure to avoid those because it's almost an instant kill if you get hit by one. And they fall randomly, so it's just a matter of chance and paying attention to some degree. Also, skeleton adds are going to constantly spawn throughout the fight to attack you. Just let your companions handle them for the most part and avoid them. You can also kite them into the skeletal serpent's attacks. Now, these two skeletal bosses are unique as well in that they're connected to the subplot in Cinderholm. If you read the compendiums, you'll make note of that. There are other bosses like the Flamekeeper that have their own subplot, but the skeletal bosses have more depth to them in terms of plot, in terms of storyline, because they connect to something that's not entirely related to their own chapter.
Somebody is going to have to ascend the wall and confirm we may travel safely.
Well, I'm not going up there. Teleport us, why don't you?
I feel somewhat stronger, but I am not going to blindly teleport us when there are so many of these traps.
Care to explain why the Tides also sends us the greatest monstrosities in Tamriel?
Ugh.
Okay, now here's a puzzle of sorts, a jumper challenge more like. This is actually a subtle reference to Half-Life where you're heading towards the Lambda complex and the military riddled an entire room full of trip mines, and you have to make your way through the level without activating any of them. So pretty much you just have to figure out step by step how to get from one part to the next. And the trip mines actually serve as a guide as well because they're placed along the correct path to get to the very top.
A lively specimen indeed. No signs of decay. An ideal candidate for the second phase of trials. What are we missing? The contagion is not working. Spriggan sap. Parts ectoplasm diluted. Raven blight. It is immune. Maria, am I missing anything? You'll have to excuse her. She's rather shy. Your friend wasn't so resistant. Quite unfortunate. We haven't sufficient bespoke specimens these days. I'm sure he can be revived, though I myself haven't possessed him. But enough about him. You're rather resistant. Is it merely your spirit? You aren't especially interesting. We'll have a room for you with Dr. Essen. Perhaps he'll turn you into a mindless thrall. We'll see. I'll wait a moment. Curious. A prominent response. Your resistance isn't robust after all.
My lord, the patient's room had trouble.
Results?
Mildly successful. Well, the agent is perhaps not the most preferable.
Why?
Well, it's just that the patients, their something dissolve after a time.
How are you still walking? I can barely breathe. Forget the cat. Get me out of here. Better yet, heal me. There's gotta be a cure somewhere. Cinderholm, the fabled College of Alchemy. I thought it was a legend. There's gotta be a cure somewhere, right? They poison us with something. Find the cure, and let's get out of here. One more thing. Maybe try finding a disguise. I've heard things about this place. You don't want to fight these people.
Unbind my neck. Have you not taken everything else away from me already?
You forget yourself.
No more.
This isn't working. We should try something else. Clearly the worm does not shed tears.
We don't shed such tears. I swear it.
The recipe calls for tears of a dragon. That is what Maria wrote down in her journal. Maria doesn't lie.
Perhaps someone deceives you, Master.
We ought to build a muzzle for this beast.
Now you wish to take away my tongue, do you? Have I offended you? I did nothing. I'd like some water, Master.
Strange. Do dragons usually drink water?
No. But I haven't felt the rain in so long. My tongue is so dry.
Are you saying you need water to produce tears?
No, Master. I merely appeal to your sympathies.
He's not cooperating, Nicholas. He won't shed tears. Perhaps we... But surely they have tear ducts.
Interesting suggestion,
Have your assistant remove the eyeball from a cadaver. Then we shall proceed to compare its anatomy to the worm's own.
What?
Right away, my lord.
Wait! What must I do to convince you? You must hear me out, Master.
I sense that we edge closer to a cure. I shall
Very
return to my
well,
study.
my lord.
I must review
I
the
beg
literature
you.
on dragons once
I have told you all there is to know of me.
What did I tell you, rabbit beast? Don't you ever mention anything like that again. Now you remain silent. I know precisely what you seek to do. It will not work. If your winged cabal hadn't sought refuge in the crater, you wouldn't be here now. Has anyone ever told you not to delve into the lion's den? Of course not. What am I thinking? You're a worm. You have no concept of living. But I forget myself. It seems the prideful fall even harder when they can reach the sky. Don't you think so? You don't look like a worm to me, but rather like a white elephant, to tell the truth. Lord Ankh has been so obsessed with carving you into pieces. Did you know that?
You lie.
Surely you know why you still have 2 eyes, a tongue. What else? Any suggestions? How do you suppose he'd react if I found another of Maria's journals? Maybe this time it'll say the recipe requires dragon's teeth. Who knows? I may well pull them out myself. If you dare so much as to mention the most subtle cue regarding the journals, I will make it happen. Do you understand?
Of course.
You've already lost your ability to fly. I wonder how you'll feel if you are also blind. Did you see him? He's so eager to dig into your skull. I am the only thing stopping that from happening. Don't ever attempt your ploy again.
Now we get into Cinderholm, which is, from a design technical perspective, probably the most impressive chapter of Krein. We're introduced to an atmosphere that has dim visual tones with a melancholic gray-blue skylight and a varying dark yellow-orange palette for warm lighting, with a medieval-styled soundtrack of grungy, creepy music in the background. The introduction of the new characters is up front and immediately piques the player's interest with discussions that introduce the highlights of the lore and the characters simultaneously. Another interesting thing to note here is that unlike with any other chapter in Krein and against conventionality, the player begins not at the entrance to the interior but at its center, high above. This gives the player a superior opportunity to get a strong sense of the environmental structure. Now, like I said, just from the technical observations, I would go so far as to say that this level is distinct among other levels across Skyrim DLCs / mods in general. And my argument is, I believe, objective, set apart from my involvement in this, which is that the architecture is obviously Gothic and Neo-Gothic inspired, but works up a very distinct structure that is integrated and multi-layer. The sections of the castle are exposed to each other in a way that doesn't feel like you're being transported between them via hallways. That's what integration is. Furthermore, there are multiple room levels within the castle, and it's quite vertically built, effectively having 4 different room levels. Finally, there's the nested structures. The tower, which is effectively an interior structure, is built within a greater interior structure that is the castle itself. This combination, paired with a topical variation in architecture, which goes from a purely Gothic image to steampunk-inspired, makes Cinderholm one of the most exceptional and unique environmental designs in Skyrim. The only thing that's lacking, I believe, is just content on the roof level and maybe a conceptual expansiveness which would make it even more impressive, such as having a massive wall around the castle that makes it into a fortress that provides additional opportunity for more content. But again, maybe that's excessive, as only so much can be done or should be done for a single chapter. There's also some technical, I guess, rustiness in terms of how the lower structure was built, just in the sense that it could use a few more polys to demonstrate curves as opposed to like cylinders. But nonetheless, the fact that it tries to approach different ways of mixing steampunk and neo-Gothic architecture in different shapes is something to be appreciative of. Now, there's so much to cover here, and there's tons of content, tons of optional content. But for the sake of saving time, I went the fastest route to obtaining what you need. The player has to obtain 2 parts of a cure for Vizier. The first is done by solving the potion puzzle at the middle level of the tower. The idea is basically that 2 color combinations produce a different color. One combination in particular produces the desired potion. And the idea is to work your way back from the center to the outer ends to figure out the settings of each switch in order to properly generate the color. After activating the valve, you would get the potion. If you look on the table, you'll see a table of color combinations. This is reminiscent to me of abelian group structures in abstract algebra, although in that case the table is incomplete. Now here there's kind of like some leeway that the player has as well for making choices that affect the subplot that have to do with the main characters, dialogue options, stuff like that, and what quests you choose to do, so on and so forth. But actually, the upcoming boss is not even really a boss that you have to do. It's really an optional boss in the sense that if the player makes certain choices and goes through an alternate subplot, then you don't end up fighting Ankh the Plaguebringer. But of course we have to cover in the case in which you do.
Is something troubling you? This tastes like poison. Let me try to stand. As something feels different.
The eyes ebb with mercy.
You son of a bitch. You didn't even try to rescue us.
I was not going to risk death needlessly.
You mangy bastard. What were you doing all this time?
I secured the front entrance. We may leave as soon as you are finished bickering.
I saved your ass twice in a row, and you can't even muster the conviction to do it once. Pathetic. What are you afraid of? You can't even risk your own tail for your master's ends, can you?
What are you on about? I am not afraid of death.
No, of course not. I see. It all makes sense now. You're not afraid of death. You're afraid of failure. Of course.
You are not getting anywhere with this pontification. We have unfinished business.
You'll never have the freedom I do, Solace. Maybe I should have left you in that prison cell after all. What's with the grimace? Go ahead, teleport us. After all, it's not your choice. You do what your master says like a good little acolyte. There's gotta be a cure somewhere, right? Is that the rest of the antidote? Give me that thing. Ah, finally. Something good for a change.
Leave it to him to drink unlabeled vials.
So, here we have the next boss, which is Ankh the Plaguebringer. Now, the main difference between the Magicka and Stamina builds here is that in Magicka builds, he hits harder as a counter to his healing spells. So he has two phases. In the first phase, he's going to use range attacks with the Plague Blight, the staff he's holding. What the projectiles do is if one of them hits you, there is a chance that it will explode, and anyone who is friendly nearby has a chance to get infected by the explosion, which in turn makes them begin to suffer the same dot that was on you. So the idea is that you have to keep your distance from your allies, and he also periodically casts an AoE around him that causes holy damage, a portion of which is unstoppable, so you have to stay away from that as well. Finally, if you are too far away from him, there's a chance that you will get poisoned with a dot, and you have to approach one of the healing mushrooms to take off that dot. So you have to kind of keep your distance. You can't be too far, but you shouldn't really be too close unless you're going in for melee attacks. Once you get him down to 0 health, he will heal to 100% and go to phase 2, in which the center structure falls and reveals the serpent totems. You have to immediately go to the center of the arena because there's an AoE in the outer ring that will kill you very quickly. After that, he'll use a frost enchanted scythe to fight you. The totems, what they do is they periodically cast magic projectiles at each other, and these do serious damage to you, but they do even more damage to Ankh. So the idea is to kind of play a cat and mouse game to lure him into these projectiles, and you have to do this a number of times to get him to a manageable health level so you can actually kill him. So I would say Ankh is probably the third hardest boss fight in the entire campaign. The reason is because even though he's OP, you have two powerful allies that help you for the first half. Unlike with Entrepreneur and Fade, where it was 2 versus 1. And also, with Vosik, there's ads, and you don't really have allies there. So I would say Vosik and Ankh are almost tied. I think Vosik does take the edge because your allies are very powerful. However, if you did not have your allies, I would say probably this is either number 1 or number 2. Definitely tied with Entrepreneur and Fade. In fact, Ankh can basically delete Mirak in a one-on-one. Now, I would also say though that like if if Zero kind of had like an extended boss fight, he'd probably be the hardest one for various reasons, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, so after that, there's a cutscene that leads to some dialogue opportunity with the main characters that may affect what happens in the next chapter. And after that, we get a neo-Gothic feel here. The boss level, just in general, the Botanica. And it has a different palette consisting of dark grays and black, stone and metallic materials, still carrying like, you know, the Gothic inspiration, but in a different way. So this is a very strong demonstration of color variation among like architectural themes, because you're still maintaining the architecture for the most part, although you're varying that too, but you're changing the color palette, and with that you want to kind of change the look and feel a little.
Divines. They must have mutated them. This is not natural.
So, it's a giant plant, whatever. Didn't know you were a botanist.
Gods, do you not ever pay attention? This is deadly. In a few years, it will grow so large as to kill entire forests of life. Slow and steady.
So, you are a botanist.
Never mind.
What?
Stop it with your nonsense.
Are all Melkajit like this?
Damn it.
Just how big a forest can this thing infect?
Ah, so now you're curious.
That doesn't answer the question. Wait. Anvil isn't too far from here. How long would it take to spread there?
I am not a botanist, understand? Years. Who knows?
My are located in it.
So what? You look at me like you expect me to do something.
If this disease spreads to Anvil, that will cause problems for me.
I am not risking my tail for your employer. That is your business. We are not in friendly territory. Do you want to alert the rest of the denizens to our presence?
Do you really hate me this much? Because I told you the truth? Talk some sense into him, Dragonborn.
Is something the matter? I am not here to coddle the lives of commoners. Your benevolence is encumbering.
Finally, we get to Sunglow Canopy, I think, which is very distinct in that it has a strong surrealistic impression with its structure, as opposed to with atmosphere. In other words, you're sort of walking through a dream here, and this environment is thematically distinct from everything else, serving as an interesting artistic passage between levels, which is quite a different way to end a subplot, and rather unique in that Skyrim quests, campaigns rather, don't really have something like this. And, you know, in the past I've criticized passage maps, but if there's some opportunity to wow the player with just the environment on its own, I would probably be swept away by that, and you know, concede that it produced some utility. versus, you know, the stuff in the old days like passage maps in Unreal that were not especially environmentally impressive, more or less, and so didn't really serve a purpose. And I think design-wise, those passage maps were there. They were passage maps because the level designers just didn't have the time to put more stuff in there, I think.
Maybe you're right. But you think being a thrall for an idol is the right alternative? Give me a break.
Do not lecture me on purpose. The only reason you live is to look for somebody dangerous enough to kill you.
Somewhere deep inside you want to rebel. You want to do something willful.
I wonder, perhaps you are not interested in this dragon book after all, but in facing the one enemy that can finally end you. Employers be damned.
What does it matter?
Would you want to live the life where your work was never destroyed?
There's too much to think about right now. There's no going back for you, is there?
Back where?
Your soul. It's not for sale.
How much does my soul cost to you?
I wouldn't pay a single coin